Thank you for gathering this exceptionally well air-conditioned space. I'm not on the program. I'm a bonus speaker. My name is Alan Keegan. I'm the CEO of Omega One, and we are solving the problem of liquidity in crypto markets. This is the first time outside of a reasonably small circle of people that anybody's heard about the Omega One project. So I quickly want to just talk about why we're doing what we're doing and why we think blockchain in the financial space is important. Basically, everybody on our team thinks of blockchain as a revolutionary technology, not in how you normally hear that term, which is sandbox to revolutionizing a certain market or a certain function, but revolutionary in the more traditional sense, where it can actually change how we make the higher level society affecting decisions. It can change the mechanisms by which we decide things that affect the entire community. As it stands right now, we have the political sphere and the economic sphere, but the majority of what actually affects us and things we interact with are made in the economic sphere. Capitalism is a government structure in the sense that it is how we decide a bunch of things that affect everybody, whether it's what ad plays in the Super Bowl or like what the shape of the New York skyline is. Mostly that's done through a market function. The interesting thing about blockchain in relation to this is that because it simultaneously has solved the problem of creating scarcity in a purely digital space, so you can automate a lot of things in the financial system, and it has reduced the need for a single centralized authority or power to ensure security and trust in transactions. It's made it such that you can build a new financial system, the potential is there, and that financial system can be made in a more transparent, less hierarchical, more efficient way, and shaped because the rules of it haven't been written to create better societal outcomes. Now, it is not guaranteed this is going to happen. This is a potential. And so we want to try to make sure this happens, and when we look at the space right now, when we look at the limitations on the space and the things that are keeping this from happening, the thing that pops out to us is the problem of liquidity. And I'll talk more about what that is, but we want to solve the problem of liquidity in order to make this whole thing possible. And then we want to go shape what comes after that. Now, the way we're going to solve the problem of liquidity, and this is going to be a mouthful, is build a decentralized automated trade execution system. That'll make a little more sense at the end of this, but I have like 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go into any real big detail about it. We can talk about it some other time. I'll be here the whole day. And if you're in this room, you probably know that this is happening. And this is a very exciting thing, probably generally a very good thing, but it creates a lot of problems, which is why I refer to it as the tsunami through the keyhole problem, where even when we were about $10 billion market cap among the cryptocurrencies, the plumbing and the infrastructure we had for exchanging value and for trading were pretty stretched. And now we're getting even bigger problems with even more capital. And the kind of problems we get, a lot of them are liquidity problems. And now that I've used this word like 15 times, I'm going to tell you what it actually means. And liquidity is how easy or cheaply you can buy a given asset. A classic example of a very illiquid asset is a house. Buying and selling a house is very difficult, time-consuming, and not fun. So you pay for a broker, spend a lot of time finding people to buy it if you're going to try to sell it, and you don't even know what price you're going to get at the end of the day. Your price discovery happens way at the end. You have to go through a whole process to know what the price is going to be. A counterexample, a very liquid asset, would be the euro. You can go buy and sell pretty much as much euros as you want on an exchange, more or less click of a button, and you know what price you're getting. One of the reasons a euro is so much more liquid than a house is that it has an exchange. So these things, exchanges, really improve the liquidity of assets. Now, the way an exchange actually works is a single place. People go and say, if anybody ever wanted to go buy this much of this thing at this price, I'm here. You can do that. There's a ton of these buying, selling orders. They're collecting something called an order book. The price that you see is the most recently completed price. Most of the time, interacting with traditional exchanges, you don't really think about this. There's so many people buying and selling on it that you just know you're going to get the price that you look at. Even if you're like medium-sized hedge fund, medium-sized institution, you know if you go on the exchange and you buy as much as you want to buy, you're going to get something at or near the current price. There's enough people buying and selling. There's a few people who are too big for exchanges. This is very unusual in traditional markets. It's pretty common in crypto markets, where if I want to go buy a certain amount of something and I'm only going to sell a little bit at the current price, I have to buy from that person, and then buy from the guy who's selling at a slightly more expensive price, and then buy the guy selling at a slightly more expensive price. So when this happens, you create something called liquidity costs. And liquidity cost is more or less the impacts you have on the price at the moment that you're purchasing it, just because you're eating up all the orders that people are willing to sell at. And I'm going to go through an example of this, because this is really important to understand. This is a huge, huge friction in the blockchain ecosystem, both for getting into it and for moving around within it. And it makes much more inefficient pricing than we really have to have. So here's a made-up exchange. The other exchange is a real exchange. And so this is showing at the current market price, which is the last time somebody bought or sold something, there is $100,000 of somebody willing to sell. And then at 5% above the current market price, there's another $400,000 of somebody willing to sell, et cetera, et cetera. So if I want to go buy $1 million on this exchange, I can't do it at the market price. I actually get something that looks a lot more like this, where the price I end up paying is some weighted average of all these different orders, and I'm picking out depending on how much I spend at each given price. In this particular kind of overly simplified example, you end up with an exactly 7% liquidity cost. 7% is a big deal. 7% of $1 million, that's $70,000, which is a big number anyway. But more importantly, if you were going to go buy something to trade out of it later, you're actually going to get the liquidity cost on both sides of that trade. So for me to go trade into an asset that I was planning to sell in the future, and it still be worthwhile, I have to be willing to pay 14% if this is the state of liquidity, which this basically is the state of liquidity. This is an actual screenshot of a Polo order book. To be fair, this was, I think, in April or May. It's just a random example that I pulled out. But if you want to go buy 1,000 Bitcoin with Ether, which is the most liquid cross on the most liquid exchange, Polo, which at the time was pretty close to $1 million. It was, I think, $1,200, $1,400 Bitcoin. You would incur around a 7% liquidity cost. You'd be spending about $70,000 to make that trade because you would push the price up 11.5% if you execute that all at once. This keeps people from wanting to deal with the crypto markets. And when they do deal with the crypto markets, they have a few different options of how they're going to solve this thing, none of which are really that great. One is you can just pay the liquidity cost. That's what most of us do. A lot of people who don't realize what a liquidity cost is are paying these and not realizing that they're getting their face ripped off paying them. You can use over-the-counter little black book, which is like a very old school way of trading assets or buying and selling things in general, which is you go to somebody who knows people who want to sell stuff, knows people who want to buy stuff, they quote you a price, they find somebody on the other side. These often have pretty small fees when you look at them and how it's listed, but the actual fee in it is the spread between what they sell to the other person at and what they buy from you at, which is somewhere in the 3 to 8% from what I've looked at. Or you can do this manually on your own. Our trading officer, John, basically has spent hundreds of hours doing this, which can work. You have to be very clever. But you also have to spend all of your time sitting in front of a bunch of different exchanges executing when liquidity shows up. You can build a robot that does this for you, which has other downfalls where it can be more predictable, but also is expensive and reasonably technical. Or you can do what a lot of people do, which is just don't buy and sell crypto assets. This is a big barrier to entry. People don't want to deal with this stuff, particularly people who have a lot of money. So this is pretty solvable. Your liquidity cost is going to be in some way a function of the size of the trade you're doing, how much liquidity there is for you to go buy and sell against, and how cleverly you actually implement that trade. So if you take a fixed size and you're trying to limit how much you pay in liquidity costs, the only two things you can do are get more liquidity or be more clever, which are kind of the two basic functions of the platform we're trying to build for people to use, where one is we just link into all the different exchanges. So we're executing across the aggregated pool of liquidity and all the different fragmented exchanges that have some liquidity on them. We create liquidity in dark pool order matching, which sounds kind of complicated and technical, and it just means if one person on the platform comes to buy stuff and another person on the platform comes to sell stuff, we can more cheaply just do that with the two of them, then go do it on an exchange and pay additional transaction fees and things. And then lastly, and here's more of the secret sauce, we can increase the intelligence of trade execution in an automated way. And a couple easy ways that you do this are TWAP, which is called time-weighted average price. You take a big trade, you break it into small trades, and you do it over time. VWAP, which you can layer on top of that some understanding and analysis of when there are more people buying and selling on different exchanges, and then you do bigger portions of your trade at the times that you know more people are going to be buying and selling. Randomization, which is if I know somebody's going and trying to buy 1 million Bitcoin by buying 100,000 every hour, I can go push up the price ahead of him, sell it to him, and then I can go sell it off at a normal price and create a profit. So instead, you want to randomize what you're doing so it's hard for people to tell how you're trading. And then lastly, there is an aspect of more market game theory, social psychology stuff you can do to draw extra liquidity out of markets. Now, this is a thing that we are building. The end state of this, the actual thing that it creates, is a little bit more like a superhighway replacing the rickety bridge that everyone's trying to run across. And in the thing I was saying at the beginning of this, of shaping what the values and what the outcomes are going to be of the new financial system, we want the value created by that superhighway to go toward things that are actually effective and good at creating good societal outcomes. And so some portion of both our ICOs, or our ICO or our profits, is going to be dedicated to charities or impact investments that we think are either good for the space, because we think the space is good for the world, or just directly good for a particular societal outcome that we want. So I tried to cram a lot into 10 minutes there. I'm not going to do questions because I do have a time limit, but I'm around. All of my co-founders are around. If you have any questions, please come talk to us. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. Anyway, thank you.